Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers from all across the world. If you're new to my live streams, we do these live streams with introduction, of course, speaking about the latest updates. And then after that, I open the space up for the community for any participation or any questions as well. So feel free to participate. In this live stream, I wanted to primarily talk to you about the latest updates in relation to the ceasefire agreement and the release of 4 or 6, to be more accurate, Israeli prisoners of war today from Gaza, and the messages that were sent by the Palestinian resistance. What's happening with the delay of Israel? Is Benjamin Netanyahu gonna explode everything and not continue with the ceasefire? And what is the likelihood of going to phase 2? The tricky part is phase 2. There are many problems, especially problems that are created by Israel in relation to phase 2, and the likelihood of proceeding despite these problems, because there were always problems initiated by Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu always started to come up with new demands, sticks in the wheels, banning the delegation from talking, cancellations, delays, but things progressed. And there are positive signs coming from the United States administration that they indeed want to continue, despite the statements and threats that, Netanyahu is angry, we understand his frustration, and, Hamas are evil, and the typical propaganda. Now, the main thing that I wanted to talk to you about today is an image here that literally shocked everyone, shocked people in Israel, it shocked Benjamin Netanyahu, and it shocked everyone. In this image, we can see one Israeli prisoner who was released. His name is Omer Shem Tov, kissing the heads of 2 Palestinian freedom fighters. Now, Israel spends billions of dollars to promote their hasbara and propaganda and lies about the Palestinian resistance, about how the people are treated, and they got a very big lesson from the first woman who was released for no exchange, Yocheved Lifshitz, just on a humanitarian basis. The Palestinian resistance wanted to return people without exchange after October the 7th, by the way. And Israel refused. Israel did not want that. It ended up going to Egypt. The Palestinian resistance spoke with Egypt, told them, listen, Israel doesn't want to take these people from us. We want to release them on a humanitarian basis. Can you please take them? Egypt, can you please take them and then pass them to Israel? Because we don't want them. These people shouldn't be here. And then Egypt accepted. The woman went to Israel. She had this press conference. Israel called it a hasbara attack on us, against them. Why? Because she revealed the truth. People were nice. They were protecting them. It was Israel that was, bombing them multiple times. Treated with kindness, cared for her hygiene, fighters protecting her with their bodies, even when they're injured, doctors with them, everything. Okay, they said, okay, we have a problem here. Now, of course, Israel already took the decision to kill everyone, including their own, from the beginning. They didn't want to keep anyone alive, Israel wanted to kill every Israeli imprisoned by the Palestinian resistance from the beginning. However, the Palestinian resistance protected them till the last day. And this image here didn't come out of nowhere. This man appreciated how much the Palestinian resistance was protecting him to the highest extents, to the deepest depths of any care that they can give him, protecting him from the Israeli attacks constantly bombarding Gaza for 15 months. It's a miracle that he was alive. He survived by a miracle. But he knows that these people put in so much effort to protect him. And they even risked their lives. Because a third of them were killed. A third of the Israeli prisoners of war in Gaza were killed because of the Israeli bombings. because the Palestinian resistance kept many of them in apartments, in houses. They let some of them go and have a walk and all sorts. So this man, out of appreciation for the Palestinian resistance fighters and how much they cared for him, he gave them a kiss and he gave them a hug. And it wasn't only one of them, it was two of them. Two of them were kissed by the forehead with this Israeli guy. All right. But the Palestinian resistance sent other messages too. It wasn't only the message of this guy kissing them, which seemed to be something he did out of his own accord. You know, Israel is going to start saying, oh, he was forced to do this, he was forced to act, he was forced to do this and that. He was released at the end of it. There's an agreement. He has to be released, right? No one forced him. He seemed to be smiling and all happy and fine. No one forced him to do that. Again, look at him. But of course, Israel is, you know, they're trying to find explanations now. By the way, it was so hard because this was a knockout from Hamas and from this Israeli prisoner of war against Israel. A massive blow for Benjamin Netanyahu and his propaganda. However, like I said, it wasn't only this image that was the big problem that happened. Alongside this, of course, is what the Palestinian resistance did today when they had the ceremony of the release of the Israeli prisoners of war. So the armed wing of Hamas, Al-Qassam brigades, they released this video here. Let me share it with you. This video here. Okay. Let's start it from the beginning. So yeah, they shared this video here. In this video, we're seeing the Israelis who are about to be released. The people wearing black are the shadow unit of Al-Qassam brigades. People who are, but that's the most special elite unit in Israel. And here, this is the guy that kissed them, telling the Palestinian resistance fighters, you know, about Israel not only killing people, but also taking down trees, taking down olive trees, hundreds of years old, like they constantly do in the West Bank. They always take down trees and crops, and they even kill sheep and herd for Palestinian farmers to take away their livelihood. And one of the Israelis here is thanking, you know, Al-Qassam brigades for being keen on protecting them, on saving them. They were afraid for them. They were protecting them very well. And all this time, for the past 15 months, many of them were killed, this guy is saying. And they could have also been killed. They could have also been killed. And this didn't have to happen, according to them. You know, their prime minister could have had a deal. And this guy's saying his grandparents are from Turkey and from Morocco, and he doesn't understand why they even went to Israel. And he thinks that everyone should go back to where they came from. Then, of course, there was the ceremony with flags of the Palestinian resistance movements and sending signs, of course, the Palestinian resistance and having participation from multiple armed groups. And then later on during this video, and let's hold on a second here. Again, sending a message to Israel here. The land distinguishes its people from the dual nationality foreigners. So we are the owners of the land and these people are the foreigners. They are honoring their martyrs. And one of the resistance fighters was reciting the Quran as well in this ceremony. The Nukhba fighters as well here. Nukhba is the elite fighters alongside the shadow unit, those who are the ones who are wearing black. So the Nukhba are the elite, and the shadow unit, usually they are even more secretive, no, hardly anyone sees. And also the Palestinian resistance is having these events in multiple different parts of Gaza. Here we can see the image of this guy also kissing one of the Palestinian resistance fighters. And this is the big problem. This is the big problem. This was an explosion. These two are Israeli soldiers. They are Israeli soldiers who are not to be released in this knock. Hamas, the armed wing of Hamas, Al-Qassam brigades, brought them to see the ceremony of these people being released, saying, wow, I can't believe it that they are released. They're seeing him for the first time. They are supposed to be released in the later phases 2 and 3. Hamas brought them here. They're saying, please save us, to Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government. Netanyahu, it's enough. You killed us already. Continue with the deal. Return us home, please. Begging Benjamin Netanyahu. 500 days, they're saying, we were with them in captivity. We beg you, please, please, please return us back home. That's all that we want. No one expected this. And they're also saying, people of Israel, we want to be like them. And Hamas also sending the message here saying in Hebrew, Netanyahu, calm down. You're always saying, military pressure will bring back the prisoners. Chill. Signaling that only through negotiations you got them back, not through military pressure. And you could have had them back before. Hamas told you from day one, we did this because you didn't have an agreement with us. Today, 2 of the Israelis who were released spent over 10 years in Gaza. Israel neglected them. They didn't want to have any deal with the Palestinian resistance. And only through negotiations were they able to bring them back. And now they brought these 2 Israeli soldiers who are not to be released now. They're supposed to be released in the later phase. This was an insanely massive stunt from Hamas against Benjamin Netanyahu. The families are going to be seeing this. So, number one, there are a couple of things that happened here. Number one, this is the first confirmation from the Palestinian resistance that these 2 are alive. They do not declare if they're alive, they're not alive. They don't give free information. So this is an indication that they're alive. Number 2, they're in good health. Number 3, there are more of them, and they're begging to be released. What's Benjamin Netanyahu's position going to be like now? You have people looking at the ceremony of other Israeli prisoners of war being released. Benjamin Netanyahu, the whole state of Israel, and they're here saying that they're shocked as well, saying that Netanyahu, you killed us, you ended us. We're seeing our friends being released after 500 days. Negotiate and simply have a deal, release us, end this whole story. The military pressure is going to kill all of us. Please, as government, as prime minister, enough. You started with a deal, continue with the deal. The military pressure is not a solution, and it proved to be not a solution. And they're begging also the Israeli people to continue protesting so that they can apply pressure on the Israeli government so that they can release them back to their homes and their families. And that was the end of the video. An explosive message from Hamas. What is Netanyahu going to do? They're sending a message that they're alive and they're well. And they're sending a message to the families that, look, these people are alive and well, and it's only your government not releasing them. What are they going to do? What is Benjamin Netanyahu going to do? Benjamin Netanyahu is now saying that, no, we before phase 2, we want to make sure that Hamas, they actually disarm. Hamas need to disarm. And then he's saying, you know what, Hamas can't be in Gaza as well. They need to leave. And then he's saying, do you know what, Hamas also, they can't have any role in Gaza whatsoever. Hamas simply need to be out of the equation completely. They should have nothing to do in Gaza or in the future of Gaza. Okay. Is that even realistic? Is that even realistic? No, it's not realistic. What's realistic? What's realistic is a formula that can be created where Hamas are no, authority lovers at the end of the day. They are people who call themselves the Islamic resistance movement, resistance to an oppression, to a virus, to Zionism, to Israel, to oppression, occupation, genocide. That's why. So they said we can agree on someone governing Gaza so long as we're talking about national figures who care for the Palestinian people, and they basically can run the show when it comes to the civil matter. However, you can dream on about disarming the Palestinian resistance. We have our resistance. It's there to confront Israel, and so long as there is Israel and there is occupation, we're not gonna disarm. You can forget about that. In case we have a Palestinian state that is sovereign and like any other state is free to deal with anything that they want, have full rights, no besiege, no being besieged, not having sanctions and everything imposed, fine, maybe we can of course have an army or whatever. But so long as these people are there, a country that's been killing us, it's not going to work. And they have an example. They're saying, look at the West Bank. Look at the West Bank. There's an authority that has been negotiating with Israel, having peace negotiations for 30 years, and they achieved nothing. So how are we going to disarm? So if there's a formula, if there's this terminology that can be used in the ceasefire agreement on phase 2, which would say, and of course now even Witkoff is saying it's difficult, Hamas are tough negotiators. The Americans said before, Witkoff is saying it's going to be difficult because Israel wants that, but I'm not sure these people look so. Well, of course they're not going to accept. The talk about disarming or dismantling should be with the genocide occupying entity, not with the victims, not the people under occupation who have been already expelled from their homes, not once, not twice, but 20 times, some of them. And if you want to return them anywhere, return them to occupied Palestine. Israel, give them citizenship. But some people are trying to save the situation. You see, there are maniacs in Israel led by Netanyahu. There are people who are slightly less maniac. So those who are slightly less maniac, Israel, the moderate Zionists, they're saying, listen, hold on a second. We will give you a safety net, Netanyahu. The opposition is sitting there, Lapid, Gantz, Lieberman, and Golan, Labor, and all of the other parties. They're saying, the return of those who are kidnapped is the most urgent task. You have the backing of the opposition. Their return is the moral thing to do. So what are they saying here? They're saying that don't worry about your government collapsing. Don't worry about your government collapsing, because the main thing for Netanyahu is his government collapsing. Smotrich told him, if you go into phase 2, you can forget about me. I'm out. Although there's an argument that he might be able to convince Smotrich with something else, because Smotrich, he continued with phase 1 on the basis of Netanyahu promised me to go back to phase 2. But his base, they're not all necessarily supportive of continuing the war. There was a poll in Israel that Smotrich's party, approximately 60% of them, were in favor of continuing the ceasefire. So he might be able to sell it to his base. So the opposition are coming and telling Netanyahu now, Netanyahu, don't worry. We will give you a safety net. You can continue to be the prime minister. We can agree on an election happening at some point in the future, and let's get these people back. And some of the argument of these people is, let's get everyone back, and then we can think about what to do with Hamas. However, of course, Hamas, they didn't get into the ceasefire agreement before they had guarantees. And that's why the other option that is on the table, that is being published in Israel, apart from the talks, by the way, you know, the babbling and the loud mouthness and the barking of Netanyahu and of Trump, the alternative that is being pushed in Israeli media is, no, we will have a delay. So we'll have an extension of phase one. But that's problematic. Why is that problematic? Well, firstly, it indicates that Israel agreed to the demands of Hamas that if they don't reach an agreement on phase two during phase one, that they will extend phase one without going back to the war, which is what Biden said in his statement when he published this ceasefire agreement that we are in now, and we could have been in over 8 months ago. So Israel adhered to the demands of Hamas, especially in that point. Then the mainstream media in Israel, they're not really necessarily talking. There's not a lot of talk about going back to the war, just empty talk. Of course, it's an option, not that it's not an option, you know, not being like, you know, naive here. But that's what they're saying in the Israeli media. What is the solution? Extending phase one. What's going to happen if you extend phase one? If you extend phase one, because phase two has things that Israel doesn't really like. They're going to be completely out of the Philadelphia corridor till the last soldier. They're going to get out of the perimeter completely. There's going to be a declaration that the war ended, and there's going to be settlement potentially for about 10 years. This is what Ron Dermer said, who's Netanyahu's favorite little poodle now, and leading the negotiations of the ceasefire agreement on phase two, because he put aside the head of the Mossad and the head of the Shin Bet, confirming that we're looking towards a ceasefire agreement or ending the war with potentially a long-term settlement. The problem, if they delay phase one, is the fact that they want to get the benefits of phase two. What are the benefits of phase two? Well, from an Israeli perspective, it's getting the people back. Hamas are not stupid. They're keeping everyone up until everything is done. They will be keeping the soldiers and the commanders of the army that they kidnapped, the first people who they kidnapped on the 7th of October and were taken as prisoners of war to Gaza. They're going to keep them until the last second. Now, what will that message be to the Israeli public, and what will that message be to the Israeli soldiers fighting for Netanyahu now? The message is going to be, we are a country that neglects the people who die for it and sacrifice the most. And that's problematic. That's very problematic. There's already a lack of trust in the army. Something that, started to take place after the judicial reform attempts of Netanyahu, but went on steroids after the 7th of October. The lies, the deception, everything. There's total lack of trust, of course, in the politicians too. But if Netanyahu doesn't bring back those who are fighting for Israel, you already have 60% non-compliance from reservists. You already have many people who are refusing conscription. You will have no luck whatsoever, despite every attempt to recruit, to bring the Orthodox Jews to the army. You're only left with those who are fooled by you. Those who are fooled by you. You know, the average 18, 19-year-old who was brainwashed from the early stages on this Zionism and this Israel and this land of the Jewish people and this we are God's chosen people and all of that. Especially, you know, the mental ones in the West Bank who were fighting towards the end in Gaza. Well, some of the, you know, only ones who were fighting really in Gaza. The main brigades who were fighting in Gaza up until the ceasefire agreement took place were from the Kfir brigade and Netzach Yehuda, these ultra-Orthodox, ultra-Zionist, nationalist from the squatting establishment in the West Bank fighting for Israel. But the opposition is giving him an option. They're telling him, listen, we will give you a backing. What are you waiting for? Now, you might ask yourself here, well, really, what is he waiting for then? The opposition is telling him, we will give you a safety net and your government will be protected. You won't step down as the prime minister. So why is he worried? He's worried because they will not necessarily give him up until the last day of his term, the date in 2026 where there should be elections. So most of them will probably give him a couple of months. I mean, to be fair, not a lot has been released apart from the fact that they're telling him, we will give you a safety net. But judging by what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing and how hesitant he is to accept this offer from the opposition and keep Smotrich in his government, is that he will be, he's now surrounded by yes men. Everyone is under his thumb. If he gets a safety net from the opposition, from people who already were in coalitions with him before and know him very well, and he's going to start having this internal criticism, he doesn't want problems. He's tried and tested in Israel. He is, yes, the longest serving Israeli PM, but he is the biggest political word that starts with a W, Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel. He's been with everyone, and everyone knows him by now, and they're sick of him because of how much of a liar he is. He's full of deception, megalomaniac, egoistic, psychopathic, narcissistic behavior. Everyone hates him. Apart from, of course, his cult. His cult are still fine with him. So that's what's worrying Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, the key thing is, or the main question is, will Benjamin Netanyahu be able to reach this formula with Dermer and with Smotrich, where he can convince them that we will go on phase 2, but or potentially have only a fraction of the opposition to come in, not as a safety net, as a full member of the Israeli government up until the election date. So he wants to remain there up until the last second. That is the main key point from Benjamin Netanyahu. And when is that likely to happen? Like clarity or lack thereof? Well, Israel is delaying the release of the prisoners, of the Palestinians. Over 490, I believe, are about to be released because, of course, the number of Israelis went up today, but the numbers of Palestinians too. They're saying we're going to release them later on. The Palestinian resistance is threatening them. If they don't, then that's an indication that Israel is going to start creating some problems. And they probably won't receive the bodies next Thursday or Saturday. However, the Americans are saying we're talking. The mediators are applying pressure. The position of the Arab states is against the ethnic cleansing. Even there's a slight retreat coming from the Trump administration. So it will be clearer by next week. But the next few days, if Israel doesn't release the Palestinians, it's going to be problematic. Towards the end of next week and when it's towards the end of phase 1, it will be clearer if we are headed towards phase 2 indeed, or if there will be an extension of phase 1, or the unlikely, in my opinion, case of Israel going back to like a full-scale war. In my opinion, that is not very likely. It's an option, but is not very likely. And these were the main things that I wanted to share with you, everyone. And I'll open the space up for all of you for your participation and any questions too. If you have any questions for me, if you wouldn't mind highlighting it. And of course, apologies in advance if I'm unable to reach all of them all at once, or all of the actual comments too. Let's see. And Dr. X, thank you so much for your super. All right. Jack, if Europe and the West love Zionism so much, why don't they take them back? Besides, they came from their Palestinians are from the Middle East, not West. Well, I mean, of course, for everyone who knows by now, this ideology was created in the West. It wasn't created by the Jewish natives of Palestine. There were Jewish natives in Palestine who didn't leave. Like the people who tell you we're coming back after we left, there was Jews before Israel was created in Palestine. Not like a 10 or 20, hundreds of years before. Did anyone prevent you from coming back before? No one prevented you from coming back before. But Europe had a problem with the Jewish people. So Zionism and Nazism collaborated. And it took that shape, putting Judaism as a front too, as a front for a colonial enterprise, this experiment of an enterprise, while serving a solution, right? In Europe, they were talking about an answer to the Jewish question. Zionism and Nazism provided that answer. And they, of course, then blamed the Palestinians, right? But hey, many are returning to their lands, to their homes. Most Israelis have dual nationalities. And millions have returned on the 7th of October. Amsi saying, how long do you think Julani and AQ will be in power in Syria? Well, I mean, I personally refuse the term AQ when it comes to them. The man has been in this organization and other organizations before. They've evolved. They have a country now. They even had their opponents with them. Judging by how things are going politically, especially with them solving the recent issue that they had with SDF, which was the main challenge for Syria, it looks like they would be able to solve things politically to an extent. And I think what people should be focusing on in Syria is not spreading too much propaganda, is to support the Syrian people and finally rebuilding their state. These people have been into enough wars for the past 15 years. And of course, you should monitor everything with a critical approach, of course, if you don't want to support or be completely anti, being critical, but reading what's happening on the ground and not necessarily through a lens of one or two people online or, people who you only follow. I hope that makes sense. And Glenn Huxley as well, thank you so much. Now, Splatted is saying Israel is claiming that the Bibas kids were murdered. Is there any evidence that can counter their claim? Well, there's a lot of evidence that can counter their claim. Number one, the evidence that came from the first day, from Israel's reaction. So take it this way. Israel knew that on October the 7th, many Israelis were kidnapped to Gaza. Yet, despite their knowledge, they went on a carpet bombing genocidal campaign in Gaza. Does anyone with a sound mind, as in not with a brick inside his head, sound as in someone who is reasonable who can think, does anyone think that that approach was safe for the Israelis who were kidnapped in Gaza? Let's say you are totally careless about the Palestinians and you believe what you believe about them and you want to wipe all of them out. And of course, most Israelis do. You're worried about the Israelis. Would you go and carpet bomb Gaza when any Israeli can be in any corner? No, you wouldn't. However, the fact that Israel went on this barbaric campaign proves that not only were they not considerate of the Israeli lives in Gaza, that they were deliberately targeting them so that they don't come to this day where one of the Israeli soldiers being released is kissing the head of the Palestinian fighter. They were a liability. They implemented the Hannibal Directive on the 7th of October. The Nova Festival, helicopter images, we saw Israel shooting its population. The cars that were burnt, like hundreds of cars burnt, do you think the Palestinian resistance had, well, what would they like, have tanks? This is the Ra'im and Nir Oz and Be'eri. Did you see the damage? Did you see the tank shells in the Israeli houses? Did you see the tanks roaming around? Did you hear the confirmation from the IDF pilot who was sitting with the Nir Oz citizens saying that we were ordered to shoot at everything going back to Gaza? Did you listen to the statements of the first Israelis who came out on Israeli television saying that Israelis were killed due to crossfire? Did you see all of that at that time? All of these things are indications, not just indications, proof that a damning indictment that Israel killed its own civilians on the 7th of October and following the 7th of October. And guess what? The Palestinian resistance told them that. And guess what? Israelis were saying that from the beginning. Why don't we... and of course, if you're following this based on the BBC or Sky News or CNN or mainstream media, then you're done. So Hamas told them from day one, your people are being killed. The spokesperson of Hamas, after 1.5 to 2 months, said Israel killed 50. And you know, the initial massive strikes, 50 were killed. All of that is proof. Plus, why would Hamas kill people who they said, some of them they wanted to release on a humanitarian basis? Why would Hamas go and kill them if they are the most important card that they have in their hands? Why would they do that? It's a stupid move. They wouldn't do that. So, and in one case where there was a Palestinian fighter who shot 2 Israeli prisoners of war, the Palestinian resistance confirmed, and they said that he did it out of his own accord. We are investigating and looking into it, and he did it after Israel killed his family members. They said it. They were transparent. But it's not in their interest to kill Israeli prisoners of war. It's in their interest to treat them well and nice, so that, well, they get a real image of the Palestinian people instead of the constant brainwashing. Secondly, so that they can have an exchange. How are they going to get the Palestinians? All of that, of course, counters the claims of Israel. And let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, Israel was founded on lies. Israel was based on a pseudo-narrative, pseudo-history, with a made-up nationality. Gullyberg, what are my thoughts of the mother of all bombs being delivered to the Zio entity? I'll summarize my thoughts about that in one sentence. The world's biggest state of terror, the United States of America, sending arms to a psychopathic, smaller state of terror, which is Israel, who has been committing a genocide. Total disregard for international law, total disregard for human rights, total disregard for human life, total disregard to anything decent. Israel is a war criminal entity. Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal wanted by the ICC. So are others. Israel is committing a genocide. Yet the United States is thankfully showing everyone. Now, of course, any Palestinian would have known this from a long time ago, or people who were observing the situation, that no such thing as international law really exists, although it would be great if, you know, it has existed and it would have been implemented. But it's all showing that it's nothing but ink on paper used by the United States and some of its Western allies against other countries too. Didn't the Western leader who called Karim Khan, didn't Karim Khan say that? The Western leader called him saying the ICC is not for us in Israel, it's for, according to him, Africa and thugs like Putin. Racism to the core, supremacy, and mass terror. That's state-sponsored terror for you. And Yvonne is saying, Mahmoud, these videos are debunking everything the Zionists and Netanyahu have been spruiking. Do you think this will impact how Trump will respond? By the way, I love your live streams. Thank you and welcome. I think Donald Trump, nothing will, affect Donald Trump's reactions. Donald Trump, I think if people haven't understood him by now, Donald Trump is a man who is very narcissistic, and he has an approach that he inherited from his experience, in what was this program that he had on television, and of course his business life, trying to implement that in politics, coming up with shocking statements so that he can make an effect on people, because he knows, and well, they know, that a lot of the things that they want to accomplish, if they can accomplish them by these threats, by scaring their opponents, then that's great. So that's where what Donald Trump is doing. However, it's quickly proving that the man is completely having these empty threats at the end of the day. And he is embarrassing himself because he's having these statements. He's coming up and doing a U-turn later on. And he's trying to get his way with barking too much. It's not, I don't think it's going to affect him. All of his statements, ever since his first term and second term, were supportive of Israel and very derogatory towards the Palestinian people, very inhumane, very supremacist, very abhorrent. And not just to the Palestinian people. Look at how he's talking to everyone. He's calling his biggest ally in North America governor, Justin Trudeau. He's saying, oh, Governor Trudeau. Look at how disrespectful he is, because he said, oh, it needs to be part of America. This man is a maniac. I'm going to take Panama, I'm going to take Greenland, spitting on Europe. Good lesson for Europe, by the way, for trying to trust the United States and not having their own independence. And having these statements against the whole world. I think people are seeing through him more now. And it's clear, like, especially when it comes to Gaza, that the man was like, he put himself to shame. Jimmy's saying, I've heard that Hamas is planting explosive participating as I return. Do you believe Iran has found a new path to deliver more weapons to Gaza, maybe a tunnel? Well, I think what people need to understand is that the Palestinian resistance have been creating their own weapons since their establishment. And they have been imprisoned and chased for that. If you want to talk about the case of Hamas, they were established in 1987 after the first Intifada took place, or uprising, popular uprising, as a response for Israeli occupation and aggression. And they started to create their own weapons. Of course, many of their leaders were, kidnapped and imprisoned. Some of them released, assassinated from the first day, by the way, to counter this conspiracy of, Israeli creation and all of that garbage. But they've been creating everything and trying to be self-sufficient from day one, even with their bullets, by the way. So they create their own bullets, their own explosives, snipers that exceed some really advanced snipers. Of course, the Yasin 105, you've seen its performance, and their missiles too. So it's not necessarily Iran giving them what they need, by the way. This is what people need to understand. However, certain equipment is there. Now, Israel just revealed not long ago that, and it's interesting as I can add it to this stream, that Hamas are actually finding a new way to smuggle weapons into Gaza, and it's actually through drones coming from Sinai. Again, Israel's trying to dig again at Egypt and trying to portray Egypt as, a main contributor to the to Gaza. Let me show you that. It's called the aerial cooperation, they said. Look at that. The aerial cooperation with Hamas that worries Israel. Okay. And they're saying in recent months, a worrying collaboration has been established. Bedouins from the Negev, which is what is now called Israel, and Sinai and Gaza, drones that can equip a Hamas battalion in a few flight rounds. The IDF managed to take control of some of them, and the loot includes dozens of assault rifles, pistols, and cartridges. Unfortunately, there are smuggling operations that are successful, admits one of the battalion leaders. I imagine the worst case scenario that weapons will end up in hostile hands and will be used for attacks. So they are finding ways. Israel is saying that they're finding new ways too, and that's problematic for them. And there's a big eye on Egypt as well. And when it comes to planting explosive, yes, they are. Israel already said that, we're viewing Hamas fighters next to us in Gaza, but we can't do anything for them. Digging in areas. But that's another reason for Israel not to go back to the war. Because if you want to crush Hamas or eliminate Hamas, then why are you giving them breathing space? It shows that the side who was crushed is you, not Hamas. It's you who was crushed because of the level of casualties, 6,000. The new IDF chief confirmed. There are over 130,000 referrals for mental health and problems with the IDF. Over 16,000 confirmed wounded the other day was reported by Israel. So they will have paths, but the path that Iran, by the way, is more concerned about, Jimmy, is the path to Lebanon. And there was another report again, actually today, that Iran is collaborating with Turkey. It was actually the Israeli foreign minister. Let me share that with you. The Israeli foreign minister is accusing Turkey of helping Iran rehabilitate Hezbollah. So that was the report in Israel, saying that during a meeting with US delegations, he's saying that Israel's committed to preventing Iran from a nuclear weapon. And he was saying that Turkey is helping Iran rehabilitate Hezbollah. And he is criticizing the United States' decision to withdraw from Syria because he was hoping they would create a coalition with the SDF to counter the new government in Syria and potentially have an enclave or whatever. So that's what Iran is more concerned about with the recent changes. But again, it looks like they have support from Turkey, and other reports are saying from also Iraq and Algeria, who are supporting Hezbollah, so that it doesn't appear that things are coming from Iran directly to Hezbollah. But let me tell you something, by the way, especially when it comes to Hezbollah, there's a lot of psychological warfare surrounding them. Oh, they're weak, they're defeated, they're this and that. All of that is just talk, really. And the proof is, look at how they were performing on the last day before the ceasefire in Lebanon. 500 projectiles reaching up to central Israel and Tel Aviv. This is how you count things, despite the massive blows that they got, by the way. And tomorrow they're having a big funeral for their martyred secretary generals, Nasrallah and Safiyuddin. They're still in the picture. However, like I said, the enemies of the people of the Levant and the people of the region, they want to portray things in the way that they hope things would be, somehow wishing that they would be implemented, right? The talks about expelling the population, the talks about a new reality, the talks about Israel dictating. All of that is coming from people who have been hit really hard, who have been humiliated and defeated and haven't achieved any of their military objectives. By the way, people need to remember that Israel didn't achieve any of its military objectives in Gaza, nor in Lebanon. Eliminating Hamas, not there. Making sure Gaza doesn't pose a threat again. That didn't happen. Returning all of the prisoners of war, they're getting that, but with negotiations. That's concerning Gaza. Lebanon, what was Israel's aim with Lebanon? Returning all of the Israeli population back to the north, a north that they're struggling with. The Galilee is a problem for Israel demographically. It's an area that they struggled to Judaize completely. And now they've had this from Hezbollah. the Israeli army said from the 1st of March, we wouldn't have an objection on anyone wanting to go back to live to the north, in the north. The mayor of Metula, one of the key areas in the north, said, don't return, it's not safe. And the people are not returning. So, did he achieve anything? He didn't achieve. What does that mean? That he has been defeated. He has been humiliated. But they're trying to project power so that someone can hopefully believe that they have achieved any sort of victory. And they will fool some people. Undeniably, some people will be fooled. These tricks work on people. But not on people who are aware and can see through that. And Mahib is saying, Salam Mahmoud, Salam. What are your theories on what will happen as phase 1 ends? Will the Arab nations give a viable plan? I'm worried that the genocide will continue non-stop. These are very interesting questions. Thank you for that. And I think many people would want to actually know. And of course, we can't guarantee what's going to happen. However, my understanding from the progress of phase 1, from the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu entered the ceasefire agreement, from the between the line understandings of the statements of the Americans and the Israelis, the sentiment in Israel, the vibe that's happening is that Israel is not interested in going back to a full-scale war now. They are militarily exhausted, defeated. They need to recover. There is a lack of faith from the population. Millions, apart from the army, apart from the 120,000 or 170,000, excuse me, from the army, over 1 million of the Israeli population have referrals for mental health problems. The report said 3 million. That's not a nation wanting to fight. So I think if phase 1 ends, based on the information that we have, if Israel and Hamas do not agree on phase 2 and entering phase 2, and if the Americans and the mediators do not convince both parties to go ahead and find a mutual language or mutual terminology that will be implemented in the clauses of the ceasefire agreement relating to phase 2, that there will be an extension of phase 1. But that extension would be problematic for Israel because it would be viewed as a pointless exercise and a waste of time when people could be returning home, as we have been seeing in the past several weeks on every Saturday. People are returning home. So there's a lot of pressure. So that's what I think. There will be an extension. Benjamin Netanyahu will continue to cause problems and frictions and these dramas, partly to have statements that can be interpreted in multiple ways to kind of please all parties. Now, will the Arab nations give a viable plan? Listen, traditionally, the Palestinians and, as a matter of fact, the Arabs, the Arab populations really had traditionally no faith whatsoever in any Arab summit or any Arab leaders. So to them, these summits are summits of, minsaf, some meat, chicken, camel meat, slowly roasted, lots of rice, stuff like that. And, people sleeping and going back and having a script that the United States, representative told them to read. However, it looks like this time there's a slightly different vibe. Why? Donald Trump, with his statements, he made many people angry. He has his own way of having these statements, and he's arrogant enough to make these statements. But listen, the Arab leaders even, not all of them need America, by the way. Egypt was already offered the backing from Qatar and Saudi Arabia to pay up for the shortage that any US sanctions can impose on them, and the US will end up losing strategic pressure on Egypt or strategic leverage. Likewise with other countries too. More aggressive statements came from Saudi Arabia, a country that, Saudi Arabia's policy and their foreign policy and their media. Egypt, not only by words, but by actions that are petrifying Israel. Many in Israel now think tanks for the government saying prepare for a war, we need to reassess everything in relation to Egypt, saying a war is imminent, all of these talks. And the vibe that we got from the Arab leaders is this time slightly more decisive. That no, we don't want to expel the population of Gaza. And we have a plan. Egypt already had 2 plans actually proposed. And no, it doesn't need to take 10, 20 years. That's also part of the psychological warfare. The Turkish president told them that. We had an earthquake, he said, area 300 times the size of Gaza. We cleared everything and rebuilt everything in 12 months. So there's slightly more positivity. However, the definite answer would be when the summit happens in the beginning of March. There was this pre-summit in Saudi Arabia. But again, we're going to have to see what happens in Egypt, because that would be the main summit. And we will see what they propose. I'm expecting a bit of a stronger position from the Arab states this time, especially with like Netanyahu himself and Trump being so thick. It's like you want to make peace with Saudi Arabia, but he's saying, oh, make Palestine there, you have big land. But are you insane? Shows you the personality, the arrogance, and the psychopathy. And I'm worried the genocide will continue non-stop. Of course, no one can guarantee that there won't be a genocide, because there's a genocidal entity. So long as you have the United States administration and Israel and other countries whitewashing genocide, denying genocide, and supporting war criminals, you'll have a problem. You will have a problem. And those worries would be valid. Your worries would be valid. But again, they will not be, of course, necessary, because you can't really continue to be worried about something happening when it's not happening. And thank you, really interesting input from Mahib. And Jimmy saying, if you believe Iran is arming Yemen from head to toe with more weapons in case they start a war again. Again, in Yemen, they have technology that they built, but Iran definitely helps them. Yemen plays a very strategic role. They have been very effective, and the leverage they applied on their brave actions against Israel and the genocide coalition proved to be very effective. And their actions are very much considered in the equation, and Iran knows that. And Iran is also sending a message through Yemen. Not to say that, like, I don't necessarily believe the argument of this proxy being ordered by someone like Iran to do stuff. No. You need to understand the nature of the Yemeni people. The Yemeni people generally, you're talking about millions in the streets every Friday. Millions, as in week after week. And you have an authority in the form of Ansarullah, or what's known as the Houthis, representing, being actually democratic, unlike many Western countries that call themselves democratic, but don't listen to millions of people in the streets protesting every week and try and label them. We have many examples, So it's a strategic, and they're very important, but they're genuine. And what they're doing is out of their own accord. Likewise with Hezbollah. Hezbollah decided next day, the first move was to support, even though we didn't expect this. Hamas decided to do it, but we're a supporting front, and they paid the heaviest prices after the Palestinians. People need to remember that. So yeah, Iran is arming them, and I believe that Ansarullah in Yemen are a tough one, to say the least. I mean, the genocide coalition, the US and Britain, with their abhorrent attacks against Yemen, they couldn't stop them. And how shameful, going to support a genocidal entity against poor Yemen, trying to support the Palestinian people of Gaza. How shameful and morally depraved is that? But they are important, and they're going to be considered, by the way. Their threat, their presence is something that is considered heavily. And Preston Ferguson, thank you so much. Said all the best, Mahmoud, from country Leitrim, Ireland. Greetings, my friend, and to everyone in Ireland. Thank you so much. And also Isa Matis, thank you very much. And thanks everyone for your, of course, comments and support. Let's see if we can take any more questions with the time we have left. I can't read the name, but you're saying your response to Life Marus reporting of a Syrian genocide. HTS is massacring 500 plus Syrians a day. Mass rapes in Syria. What do you have to say about that, Mahmoud? I think, unfortunately, that's part of a very large propaganda and misinformation that is being published against Syria, and viewing things from one lens, and in many cases viewing videos that have been recycled so many times, some of them from 10 and 15 years. That's not to say that the people in Syria now are, beyond criticism or anything. But I have been observing what happened in Syria and seeing people on the ground reporting from multiple parts of Syria. And the evidence on the ground, I'm afraid, proves that things are very different. Now, one thing I would like to add as well when it comes to Syria is don't forget that some people are very interested in having a civil war again. So think to yourself, who is it serving all of this talk? Now, when Bashar al-Assad was massacring people in Syria, right? Were people always talking about him? Those who are talking about the new authority now, were they talking when he was imprisoning people in dungeons and torturing them? Where were they? A valid question here, by the way. And how much of the Syrian population do they represent? We're seeing the dungeons that people were released from in Syria. All of these things should be considered. And the most important thing in relation to Syria is you need to listen and view and read multiple sources on Syria, from Syria, on the ground, and make your view. Simple. However, there has been so much misinformation that it's unbelievable, by the way, in relation to Syria. And Alan Marwin as well, thank you so much, my friend. Let's see if we have anything else. Munzer as well, thank you so much for your participation. Sandra, that's really interesting. You're saying if any chance of a one-state, non-racist, secular democracy one day, is it good long-term aim? Well, the funny thing is that when Zionism was established, and when the previous British Empire came up with the Balfour Declaration, and when Europe found a solution to a problem that they had, their racist problem, their problem with the Jewish people, and this Zionism came as a solution side by side with Nazism, they said the land in Palestine. Okay. They were considering other places too, by the way. Herzl himself, who many people question his Judaism altogether, he was considering Uganda. So Palestine wasn't that holy, by the way, for Zionism. However, reaching to 1947 and the UN decision, of course, to have half a state for the Jewish people, half for the Palestinians. Firstly, it gave them half. But why did it happen? And how comes the UN at the time did it without the consent of the original people? Only after the forceful mass terror campaign supported by Britain and the Zionist thugs in Palestine, who all of a sudden had a state. Basically, terrorist gangs set up a state, said this is our state and this is Jewish, and the world started to accept it. I'll tell you why. And there's an argument as well, part of the big propaganda. Oh, you didn't accept a state at the time, they'll tell you, the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people at the time, they said, we don't want a state divided based on religions, because we've always lived here together. The Palestinians said at the time, we don't want a sectarian state based on racial or religious division. Zionism and the West wanted that in Palestine, not the Palestinian people. Why? Because everyone was living in Palestine historically. Jews, Christians, and Muslims, and atheists, they were living there. So that was the requirement. We're not going to accept a state, an Arab state. Why should it be just for Arabs, and then other part for Jews and other part? What is that? And who does it serve? It's a sectarian division. So, of course, the powerful decides, the powerful writes the history. And they started off with this project that proved to be a neo-colonialist expansionist project, because immediately the Israeli prime minister at the time, David Ben-Gurion, or Grun, his original surname, he started to say that, no, we're not going to be fine just with what the UN gave us. Let's expand more. So from day one, they stole more than what they were given. And then in 1967, they went off, more than quadrupled their size by occupying Sinai, the Golan Heights, and the West Bank as well. However, there is a prospect of that in the future. And the thing is, who is there to talk to about it? Who's there to talk to about it? Netanyahu? You see, the problem is, this ideology has been established on sectarianism and violence and racism and supremacy. What you need to get rid of is that ideology altogether. And the only time that Israel was about to accept any sort of peace that wouldn't have ended with a one-state solution, by the way, was when they were considering seriously having a two-state solution, which is also a problematic solution, by the way, because in many cases it would not address core problems such as the return of the Palestinian refugees who were expelled in 1948 and 1967. So that is the ideal solution would be to have a one state for everyone, one state that has justice, equal rights, and direct democracy. People can choose who they want to lead. In terms of the labeling, secular, non-secular, you would have a different argument here, because the term secular can be problematic, because secularism, what type of secularism are we talking about? What, French secularism, or what, Turkish type secularism, Erdogan type secular? What kind of secularism? So the terminology, but let's say if you talk about a one-state solution, with justice, equality, equal rights, elections, freedom, that would be the ideal solution. And I think that's what most people, or everyone, should be focusing on. Why? Because it would protect the rights of everyone between the Jordan River to the sea, not favoring one person over another, like Israel does now with its systematic, legalized racism. In 2018, they introduced the nation state law. Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people. And they have this interesting apartheid system with the citizens class A, B, C, D, E, F, G, up until we reach Z. B inside of Israel or occupied Palestine, C, West Jerusalem, D, West Bank, Z, Gaza. But yeah, I think that's what people should be calling for, really. And Tam's saying, Mahmoud, what do you think, or what do you know about the Lebanese army attacking the people trying to celebrate their martyrs? I think, many things that are reported in Lebanon and also in Syria are taken out of context, by the way. I think in the case of Lebanon and certain officials in the Lebanese establishment, in many cases, and of course not to justify it, some of them take the initiatives on their own. Because let's say if we want to talk about the Lebanese army consists of people from all walks of life in Lebanon. People who like the resistance, people who hate them and want to eliminate them. So some of them will be more sympathetic. Some of them will be less sympathetic. Also, there are people inside of the Lebanese establishment who clearly have an alliance with the biggest enemies of the Lebanese people. And that's also a problem. However, tomorrow, well, we'll see. Tomorrow you will see how many people go to the funeral and how many people don't. And I think that will be a national referendum. I think that will be a national referendum to show that, well, okay, this is what we have. This is how many people support them. This is how many people don't support them. To give an indication. And many people wouldn't really like it. And we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in for another live stream. Thank you for everyone who participated. Apologies, of course, if I didn't address all of your comments, just for the time limit. But I appreciate your contributions and also very interesting questions as well. Thank you for everyone who sent supers too. Thank you for your support. That would be Isa Martins, Isa Mattis, Alan Marwin, Munzer Shihab, Preston as well, Preston Ferguson, Glenn Hoxley, and Dr. X. Thank you so much, everyone. Apart from that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening or day or night and weekend as well. Stay blessed, take care, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone.